Hello everyone, my name is Joshua. This is the 137th video on my video journal series. Today's date is Thursday, the 25th of June, 2026. How's everyone been? I've been pretty good, thank you. I am a bit tired today, so I'll keep this a short one. Don't worry, that Detective Conan movie review of the third movie will be coming out shortly. I just gotta watch it, and don't worry, I've been saving them onto my laptop. So yeah, obviously they'll be coming in shortly, those reviews, so don't worry about that. And I heard there's a new Detective Conan movie coming out in theaters. I forgot what the title was called, but it's going to be the 29th movie of the series. I'll be definitely watching that one in theaters and giving my opinions on it. So stay tuned for that. I think that one will be in July. But today I want to talk about corporate logos, more specifically old corporate logos. You know, everyone knows the old Pepsi logo, um, the old Microsoft Firefox logo. Depends what you're into, you know, WH Smith, that iconic logo. For me, like logos that stick into my mind, especially old ones, is like the rainbow apple one that they used in the 80s. It's just like the Apple logo, but it's like rainbow stripes. Um, and you know, just like, yeah, bunch of logos. The Firefox one and the old Chrome logos, like, are just so engraved in my mind because as a kid I used to use those applications a lot, you know, in the early 2010s before they oversimplified their logos. That's something that a lot of companies are doing nowadays. They're trying to oversimplify the logos to the point where they just lack all characteristic or meaning. You know, so just like the Google Chrome logo, for instance, you know, used to look very detailed initially, but then they just slowly removed features, just like the Firefox logo. They just slowly removed detail, and now they all just blend together in my mind. Whenever I think of Firefox, I think of their like mid 2000s, early 2010s logo where you can clearly see the fox, but now it's just like a red sash around an orb, you know? It's not really, you know, distinguishable in my mind. Sometimes, you know, more detailed logos, if you add just some smart detail in there, just that tiny little detail, but it's a very smart addition, it just sticks out in your memory more, you know. um, you know, the old, if you're in Sydney, you know what I'm going to talk about, but you know, the old City Rail logo, the double arrows, you know, they got, because yeah, our previous operator of Sydney's chain network was a company called City Rail, which was obviously the government body that ran all the trains in Sydney, and that got replaced by Sydney Trains. They just did like a refresh, and they got rid of the old City Rail logo, the old double arrows, and to me that is iconic. You know, if you want to create a logo that is so iconic and memorable, it has to be like drawn by a child, but it has to be distinct enough so then like it gets pretty much engraved in your mind. And the City Rail one is like perfection. Same with the British Rail logo. You know the old British Rail logos, the British Rail logo. Sorry, it's basically the red double arrows. That's kind of like the City Rail one. It's just like one arrow there and one arrow there. But the British one, it's so iconic, and they kept it around even though British British Rail doesn't exist anymore because it's all operated by separate companies. Well, now they're going to reverse that. I knew uh, Starmer's government in the UK were renationalising the UK railway network underneath British Rail, but they still kept that logo because it was too iconic, you know, just to get rid of. If you're in the UK, you ever been to like a railway station, you know, you will see that logo. Same with the London Underground roundel, you know, it's just so iconic. Imagine replacing the Underground logo with just like a generic like sphere that just says like London Underground. It'll just lose all its character, you know? Whenever I just see a roundel, not even with any text on it, I just assume, hey, that's London Underground because it's so iconic. It's just such a distinct shape, you know? So yeah, like you know, the I guess to some extent you could also say the New York City subway font and just like the whole theming of the New York City subway, you know, just has that distinct feel to it. It's not necessarily a logo per se, but it's just more like a vibe, more like a layout, you know, of all the characters and letters. You know, the specific font that they use. Imagine just getting rid of all of that, you know? You just you know, that's just basically history erased. You know, you just like, everyone has to now get used to the new system, and a lot of people just, aren't bothered, so they'll just think of the old logos, the old, how things used to be. So I don't know why brands are constantly evolving their logos. They just want to like, hey, let's get this very good logo and let's just oversimplify it. To me, like I can see why they want to keep modern. They want to look sleek. They want to be up with the times. But some logos are really like perfect as is. You don't need to change them. Um, maybe um, you can add some additions here and there, but just keep the logo that everyone likes because you spent millions and billions of dollars trying to create that familiarity in people's heads, but then now you're going to spend billions and billions more trying to get this new logo into people's minds, this new, I guess, perception of the brand. And a lot of people, it won't because people will just associate it with the old name, the old logo. A good example of names would be if you live in Melbourne. I know this video is supposed to be me talking about corporate logos, but it might just be like familiarity. When you just change something that everyone's already familiar with, it just makes it hard for people. But people just keep the old name or the old logo in mind. Like when you use X, right? Nobody calls it X. Most people I know they just call it Twitter. I'll boot up Twitter, even though it's now called X. Because it's so engraved in my mind, and it was ingenious. Like, oh, you press a message called a tweet. What sound does a bird make? Tweet, tweet. And what is the logo of Twitter? It's a bird. It was so ingenious, but then, Elon Musk had to come in and just wipe all of that and just do an X, But, I guess a lot of people like myself were just already associated with Twitter. But anyway, so yeah, if you live in Melbourne, Southern Cross Station used to be called Spencer Street Station. It's one of those big train stations in the Melbourne CBD. And, still to this day, a lot of people I hear online, and even when I went to Melbourne, they just don't use the name Southern Cross. They refer to its old name as Spencer Street because you know, there's the nearby Flinders Street station, which is on every postcard that you get in Melbourne. It's the iconic building in Melbourne. But you know, I guess maybe they change it because people will get confused, like Spencer Street, Flinders Street. But no, Spencer Street is a very like straightforward name, and everyone, you know, I bet you a lot of people who catch the train in Melbourne who have been doing it for decades and decades before the rebrand would already be familiar with the name Spencer Street, and they're not going to switch to Southern Cross because Spencer Street just sounds a lot catchier. It keeps in, I guess, consistency. It tells you where it is in the city. It's along Spencer Street. Um, you know, I can't think of any examples with Sydney train stations. Oh, in Sydney, another thing, Homebush. The So yeah, basically where Sydney Olympic Park is now, which is the suburb of Sydney Olympic Park, a lot of people, the older generation, still refer to it as Homebush Bay, which was the name of the suburb that was once there before Sydney Olympic Park got built in the 90s for the Sydney 2000 Olympics. And I remember in school, we went on a field trip to Sydney Olympic Park, and I remember one of my teachers said, "Oh, we're going to Homebush Bay." But I'm like, "Where's Homebush Bay? I never heard of that suburb." Oh, because that was the old name of the suburb before it got developed. Because Homebush Bay was essentially just all greenery, right? There was no infrastructure there. I think it was just like abandoned factories. So yeah, I guess here in Sydney, if you ask an old person, Sydney Olympic Park, they're like, "Oh yeah, Homebush Bay," around that area. They still refer to it as Homebush Bay instead of Sydney Olympic Park. So I guess that's sort of like, I guess Sydney Olympic Park is more recognizable towards me because I'm younger. I was born after the 2000 Olympics, but for older generations, they won't like, I guess, switch over. They'll still have the name Homebush Bay in their minds, and they're not going to switch over. But I guess that makes sense. Site of the Olympic Games, you want to call it Sydney Olympic Park. But when brands and all that, like corporate bodies, they just change up their logos or their fonts or you know, maybe they keep the name, but they just like change the font. It just ruins everything, right? You know, it's like you know, Coca-Cola, for instance, right? Coca-Cola has kept their logo pretty much the same for like you know 150 years or how long it's been around for. Pepsi have updated their logo quite a lot, but they've always kept that like iconic, you know, I guess, you know, how do you describe the Pepsi logo? It's basically a circle, but there's like a mini swoosh in the circle. You know, they've kept that aspect. They haven't like changed it so dramatically. They haven't changed it like too dramatically, but you know, you can still tell it's Pepsi sort of thing. You know, because I guess Pepsi wants to be like the, you know, the quote unquote edgier drink, the drink for, you know, the youth. So they got to keep in with the times. Coke is for like the older people, I guess. So that's why they kept the logo the same. But imagine replacing the Coke logo with an Arial font that just says Coca-Cola. People will basically riot on the streets. I'm not even lying. If Coke gets rid of their logo, that's it. That's all the brand familiarity just gone. Billions of dollars in advertising that they spent trying to get the Coke name. And I even got a Coke plaque in this in this space over here. It's right near over there. It's a little bit too heavy, so I'm not going to bring it here today. Maybe I'll bring it in a future video. But yeah, I was just looking at that Coca-Cola plaque that I have in this room, and I can just see, yeah, the swooshes. You know, I even got it in my head. You know, the iconic swoosh of the Coke logo. You know, um, yeah, that's like, you know, just gutting that logo. And obviously, Coke won't do it. You know, it will literally be the most unpopular thing. It will be one of those situations where both sides can agree on something that, you know, it doesn't matter who you ask on the street, they will hate it. All right. Pepsi, you know, their current logo is more like a revamp of their old '60s logo, the logo they used in the '60s, and I quite like it. You know, I didn't like the Pepsi logo before that. I think it was a little bit too generic. But the old I guess the revamp, you know, it does look nice. And I got that you know, Pepsi logo in my mind, that iconic like swoosh, like those swirls in that mini circle. You know, it's something that a child can draw. You know, a child can like, you know, I think it works in like very certain circumstances. You know, the Coca Cola logo, obviously a child might not be able to draw that, but when they see it, they'll instantly recognize it. You know, even if it's just like the vague outline of it, they'll be able to recognize it. So there are exceptions. You know, I quite like the old Microsoft logo where it just said Microsoft. That, you know, is engraved in my mind. But now, you know, Microsoft, they switched like an Arial font in their logo with the Windows logo next to it. And there's nothing like too bad about it. I guess Microsoft really hasn't had like, you know, instantly recognizable logos in my opinion. Apple obviously, you know, has a very, very famous image as their, I guess, corporate profiles, just basically an apple with a bite in it, which I think is ingenious. Right? It's a very, very good logo, obviously. Um, but yeah, I guess like, you know, like me talking about this is basically free advertising, and this video is not endorsed by any corporation. But yeah, I just kind of miss old logos, and some logos have changed for the better. You know, I can't think of any at the top of my head, but you know, there's some like some logos which have, you know, been redesigned and they look like infinitely a lot better. I said Pepsi before. I know that one will be a little bit controversial because people like the 2000s and 2010s design. I quite, you know, I don't absolutely hate it, but I like the new like Pepsi logo which they brought in a few years ago. Oh yeah, you know, you know, the old McDonald's logo. I might sound weird for saying this because the McDonald's logo has always been that like golden M arch, but you know, I missed it when they just put like that golden M and then they just put the rest of the you know, the rest of the word like McDonald's. You know, the logo they used in like the '80s, where it just has like the M and then it says CDON. Yeah, it just spells out the rest of McDonald's. I quite miss that, you know. It's simplistic, but you know, it just has like a very nice font to it. You know, the one they use in like the '80s and '90s, you can search it up. You know, just when I think it's just like a massive M, obviously it's instantly recognizable, but, I kind of missed it when they, had the full name McDonald's on their logo instead of like an M, you know. The logo they used in like the 50s and 60s, that one is also pretty cool as well. We're just reminiscing of old logos for a time which I didn't even exist in. Um, the old Red Rooster logo, for instance, had like a rooster on it, but now it's just like very, like it's like a two circles and just like a beak, which is supposed to resemble a rooster, but in my mind, it just looks like an owl. If you look at the Red Rooster logo, it just looks like an owl. But I associate the Red Rooster logo with, having uh, obviously the name Red Rooster on it, but it had a chicken on it, a very happy chicken, and I quite miss the interior of old Red Rooster restaurants. Um, like the ones in Western Sydney, which I used to go to. That's also instantly recognizable. But obviously, they've like it's been a while since I've been to a Red Rooster, but they've like updated all the interiors. Oh, another thing. If you're Australian, you would know the interior of the old Hungry Jack's restaurants, the 50s diner setup. That is so iconic with Hungry Jack's. But then, in the last couple of years, they've gotten rid of all those retro interiors and they just put like bland ones in. When I go to Hungry Jack's, the first thing that pops into my mind, even if it's a new Hungry Jack's store, is that old 50s interior. I'm still waiting for like those red seats, the black and white tiles on the floor. They're playing like old rock and roll music. That doesn't exist anymore. Like the original concept of Hungry Jack's was to make it like a classic like burger dining restaurant, kind of like Burger King, but more retro. And I just like those old interiors, but then they got rid of them, put like these bland ones in, and it just ruins the vibe. If you've been to Hungry Jack's up until like the late 2010s, you'll know what I mean, right? Um, yeah, it's just like the old McDonald interiors and all that. I'm just talking about fast food because that's just what pops into my brain. And this can really just be semiotics. It's just, when a corporate body just changes something that's so familiar and iconic with the public, they just get rid of it and then they just put in something that's so lifeless and bland. And I know they have to innovate, but like, why do you have to scrap the old 50s style interior at Hungry Jack's restaurants? Like, come on, that was an attraction in and itself. I remember the old tables, the unlimited drink refills. At Hungry Jack's, all the ones I've been to in Sydney as of late, they don't have the soda fountain within the public vicinity. It's always behind. And I don't think you can get like free refills anymore. But when I went to New Zealand, God bless the Kiwis when it comes to their, what they call it, Burger King over there. They still have unlimited drink refills within the public vicinity. So I asked the guy, do you still have unlimited drink refills? And he says, yes. And I'm like, man, I love New Zealand for that. See, if you're watching this and you're from New Zealand, if you own a Burger King restaurant in New Zealand, then do not get rid of the unlimited soda refills, right? I want to go back to that country just for that specific reason, right? It's the best thing that humanity has ever invented, unlimited soda refills, right? Change my mind. Like, as a kid, I used to remember, at least, the Hungry Jack stores here in Sydney, when they used to offer unlimited drink refills, I remember just like drinking so much, just so much soda just to get my like money's worth. Fond memories. Um, I think if you're like from the US, obviously this might be like more commonplace than here in Australia, but I'll pay those extra $2 to get a little bit more sludge. Um, so yeah, like I think this one could just be like not even corporate brands. It could just again just be the semiotics, you know, the things that we associate with brands that have now changed and we're grumpy about it. But it really just breaks my heart when a brand changes something that is already so popular with the public, and then they change it to something that everyone hates. Then obviously they're going to change it back, but sometimes they don't. And I've been to a few fast food restaurants now, like McDonald's and Hungry Jack's, and they've gotten rid of the old play places there, the children's play area, and I just put like a bike racks or something else in there, and that's like a a key memory of my childhood. Just essentially, well, it's always going to be in my brain, but for kids growing up now, they won't get to experience what I um, got to experience in childhood. That is playing at the playgrounds, at fast food restaurants, and um, you know it brings that back, obviously, old childhood memories. But those memories are starting to fade away, and it does make me sad that they're removing play places. I don't know why. They were good, like, place for kids to socialize, to get some exercise after they chug down like a Big Mac. If you're feeding children Big Macs, which I don't think you should, but once they finish with the Happy Meal, um, obviously they're always like dirty and unsanitary. You always found that like half-eaten nugget in the slide, or some kid decided to pour his Coke everywhere, and it's always so sticky. But I have so many great memories in there, and you know, playgrounds are important, all right, for children to strengthen their imagination and social skills. Like, I think we will eventually learn the hard way in like 20 years' time, when we do find social skills to be lacking in our as I'm recording this, youth, but in 20 years' time they'll be like adults. It really is concerning. And obviously, you hear about Gen Alpha, iPad babies, and to be fair, I was raised on an iPad and I turned out perfectly fine. But you know, if it ain't broke, don't fix it, sort of thing. I playgrounds, like, obviously I went to a lot of playgrounds as a kid. I didn't appreciate them when I was a kid because I just wanted to go home and play on my iPad. But now looking back, it was so fun just getting to, explore, play around with other kids when I was little, and just like really, it's just really such a great environment for like children to be raised in on playgrounds. You meet other people, you meet other families, you get a lot of exercise, you unleash your imagination. It's just a great time, being outdoors. I didn't become an outdoors person since like after COVID, but it was when COVID came around when I started becoming an outdoors person after all the lockdowns ended. But it's just, yeah, I just I feel like I'm a bit like an old man yelling at cloud, but yeah, just I think bringing it back to what I said earlier, we should really bring back some old corporate logos and bring back the old City Rail logo, please. All right, I know everyone hated City Rail, but it's just so iconic. The two double arrows, the 7-7. Some people like to call it, but yeah, just bring it back. Like, it's so instantly recognizable. Instead, they replace it with like the orbs, transport for New South Wales, Sydney trains, Sydney buses, and all that. They changed the color of the orb: blue for buses, orange for trains, green for ferries. And like, what was wrong with the old Sydney buses logo, for instance? Sydney buses don't exist anymore. The corporation, that is, because now, ever since I think it was 2013 or 2014, Sydney's bus network has been operated by different companies. But before, when it was all operated by the government, he had the old Sydney buses logo, which was basically like it was like a, how do I describe it? It was like a loop de loop, and it would just show like an image of like a road doing a loop de loop, and then slowly transforming into waves. And that's because Sydney buses operated Sydney's buses and ferry network. Don't ask me why they named Sydney buses, even though they're operating ferries. But yeah, and I thought that was like a very great logo. It's like, oh yeah, Sydney buses, they operate road transport and ferry transport. Very clever logo. And obviously Sydney buses don't exist anymore. But sometimes I go out and I see old bus benches and they still have the old logo on them, albeit like very faded. But it brings me back. It's like saying, why can't we make like slick logos anymore? It's like replacing the NASA logo with just like an Arial font NASA. Like, everyone, when they think of NASA, they think of the iconic logo, right? And I think we were very good at creating logos in like the 60s, 70s, 80s. You know, maybe before the internet era, sorry, because obviously without the internet, you need to create something that, um, remains in people's heads. You know, you had to create catchy slogans, catchy phone numbers, uh, instantly recognizable logos. But now with the internet, it seems like some companies have gotten lazy and want to make themselves look like the next big tech startup, like a more professional. But like, why? Um, if you watch old ads from like the 80s and 90s, you'll see how different they are to modern day ads. Because back then they, obviously, uh, information was harder to spread around, obviously due to the lack of the internet. But they had to create they had to be inventive. They had to create funky slogans, funky logos, and all that to get people's attention and get them into their heads. But that's just my little rant. Like I said, obviously I'm not gonna like persuade. I doubt I have the power to persuade any company, to change their current logo and revert to the old one. But yeah, that's just my opinion on it, and I think a lot of other people share my opinion. Where we just look at old logos and I'm like, oh, this looks so great. Why did they change it? And it's just like the semiotics, right? Like big companies have spent a lot of time, money, and resources towards creating this image in people's heads. When they think of this certain image, this certain shape, this certain semiotic, um, you know, maybe I'm using semiotic in an inappropriate manner here, but you know, that sort of system in your brain where like you view stuff not even related to the logo or company itself, but it brings that memory, brings that, um, you know, instant familiarity, saying, oh, um, those shapes or whatever, that like certain formation kind of reminds me of this logo. Um, yeah, it sounds really weird, but um, it's just like you know it just hits in your brain, right? It hits in your brain, and to me that's how you got a good logo, when a child can draw it, it's instantly recognizable by the public. When someone sees like even the minimal, like, I guess, outline of those shapes or logos or whatever, they're like, hey, this looks like this, and they're correct. And where like it's plastered everywhere. That's how you got a good logo, and don't change that, all right? Because um, people, I guess, are reluctant to change sometimes, and I think logos is one of them. If people already know, you know, something, and they're already like familiarized with something, it's less likely for them to, I guess, refamiliarize themselves with something that's new and completely different. And I gave a couple examples in this video. Obviously, there's plenty more, right? There's plenty more examples, and I can go on and all day. But yet again, I am going a little bit tired. I am getting a little bit tired. You can tell by my speech pattern. I'm stumbling up my words here. But yeah. Essentially, end of the story is um, don't try and fix things that aren't broken. And I guess there's nothing stopping me from like calling, um, I guess, recalling these old logos and um, you know referring to sites like Sydney Olympic Park as Homebush Bay. But yet again, it just depends on what I'm already familiar with. Um, like I still call X Twitter, for instance, because X is such like a broad like word. It's literally just a letter, right? It's not even a word. It's a letter. All right, it's a letter. Oh yeah, you want to hop on X? Everyone just says, oh yeah, you want to hop on Twitter, even though it's called X. And I bet you someday, most probably, they'll switch the name back to Twitter. Who knows? um, it's like another example I'm gonna end on. HBO Max, originally called HBO Max, then it's changed. Then they changed the name to Max, just simply Max. Like, oh yeah, you want to watch Max? Why do you want to watch some kid? Like, don't take that out of context, right? But like, it sounds really weird saying, oh yeah, you want to go on Max. But like, who's this Max fella? But you say HBO Max, and people instantly know because it's just like oversimplification. Um, it's just, and obviously now it's they changed it back to HBO Max, which is the name of HBO streaming service. It's just like if Disney Plus was just named Disney. Oh yeah, you want to watch Disney? It's lacking that extra element to it. Um, and yeah, that's just oh, I guess the old Blockbuster logo. If I'm thinking about it, but Blockbuster went defunct before they could really like change their logo again. If Blockbuster was still around today, their logo would just be like an oversimplified, um, just Arial font. I really am attacking Arial, but that's still like what a companies like. A lot of companies like doing that nowadays, just putting a generic font of their company. But when you think of Blockbuster, you think of the ticket. All right, you think of the tiered ticket on their logo. Blockbuster. There's a ticket. Why there's a ticket? Because it's a movie rental business, and you think, movie rental. But anyway, I'm going on for too long. But anyway, that's the end of this video. I can finally close all these books. Yet again, Detective Conan movie review will be out soon. But yeah, today I was just feeling very knackered. So yeah, I guess I'll catch you all later and see you all tomorrow. Catch you all tomorrow.